Knowing when it's time to push yourself, knowing when it's time to take that next step, knowing when it's time to ascend to that next level. And I'm going to talk about that on this segment of the Gig Geezer. And if this is your first time checking out the Gig Geezer, if you're a returning visitor of the Gig Geezer, hey, thanks for coming by. And if you would not mind, hit that subscribe button, give my content a thumbs up, share my content among others, and I definitely welcome your comments in the section below. Well, I have just completed what amounts to what is my grind for today, Monday, March 23rd, 2023. I just dropped off a set of tires to a customer off the Roadie app, and what I would call is parts unknown. In fact, as you see here on the inset, you see kind of me driving into where this person lives. You know that you're out somewhere when you see the road is based on the road is your family name. That's typically in a lot of rural areas. But that said, what I want to do is segue into some of the thoughts that I had on my mind as I drove out to this location, and hopefully you'll get something out of it. And with that, if you like the content that's been provided in this segment of the Gig Geezer or in any other segment of the Gig Geezer, hit that subscribe button, give my content a thumbs up, share my content among others, and I definitely welcome your comments in the section below. There comes a time in whatever you do, you have to begin to reassess and set new goals, whatever they may be. It could be as you're on a decline, but that you try to maintain a certain standard, or when you're on an ascension, you try to raise the bar. Now, raising the bar is something that's very innate for me because I was a high jumper. Pretty good high jumper at one time, in fact. And school record holder in high school, a good high jumper at a regional level at the high school level before I tore a patella tendon, which was a kiss of death way back when. They didn't have arthroscopic surgeries. What happened was you had an 8-inch cut on your knee area. They closed it up with staples, and then you had from an ankle to the inner thigh cast for about 6 weeks, and then you were on your own, pretty much. But my point is, though, I was a high jumper, and in the competition, you know, the last person, you pretty much know who wins is because that person's the last one standing. And in my competitive experience, I was often the last person standing. And I had the option of raising the bar, raising the standard. If I was opting to go for a record, a personal record, or just another height. Typically, it was my athletic experience where I had the control over the bar. And so this past week, I happened to enter into a range of numbers that I'd been talking about for the last several weeks and months now in my Sprinter/cargo van ownership. I'd been talking about making anywhere between $400 and $500 a day, and beginning to make anywhere between $2,000 and $2,500 a week. This past week, I finished at $2,015 and change. And I'm not talking this in terms of a victory lap. This is not a victory lap for me, because before I go any further, what I want to do is acknowledge one of my subscribers here on the Gig Geezer channel. His name is Steve. He's in the Columbia area. In fact, yesterday, Sunday, March 19, 2023, he made a comment on one of my posts, and then we happened to meet later that afternoon, and it was on my last pickup of the day. He's coming in one way in a Walmart parking lot. I'm coming in another way. I see this Dodge Ram 2500 Sprinter van. I'm like, oh, this guy's for real. He's for real. He's probably the person who's been getting those orders that I don't get on some of these apps. He turns in head first. I back in. He goes to the back of to open up his doors, and he looks over and says, Gig Geezer, man, I commented on your page. I mean, this is what happened now. But we get to talking numbers, we get to talking business, and I left that conversation like, man, Steve is digging in that pie and starting to eat from it. He's starting to cut out slices of that pie. He's trying to work on getting a hunk out of that pie. And based on what I've been talking about in this channel, I'm just starting to nibble. I'm just starting to pick off of the crust. I hadn't gotten any further. But I want to get in on that pie. I want to start to taste. I like apple pie. I want to start tasting that apple pie filling. Okay. And the only way you can do that is that you've got to raise the bar. You've got to raise standards. For the past 3 years, my bar had always been $200 a day, $6,000 a month. And yes, while I've been talking about making $400 to $500 a day, I had not said, okay, this is what I'm setting out to do every day. But last week, when I started seeing these numbers becoming more consistent, and after talking to Steve yesterday, and today is Monday, March 20, 2023, it's time to raise that bar. So for me, as a part of the incremental progress, the goal now is making a minimum of $300 a day. I'm actually in the midst of completing a roadie order that's taking me to some parts unknown in the greater Charleston area, and I'm already at $200 and change. I may not make $300 today, okay? And when I start setting goals, I'm dead set on meeting those goals, making those goals, because $200 a day, whenever I put in a full day's hustle, in fact, it's gotten to a point where I was making $200 on a half a day. But at a minimum, when I put in a full day's hustle, I had failed to make $200 or more. It had been since the end of August. So I've gone basically 7 straight months making $200 a day. Shit, with all the apps that I'm working on, it's inexcusable if I fail to make that much money. And so if I'm gonna make it to the next level, when I've spoken of that commercial money, the next level for me being $8,250 a month, since I'm already at $7,000 a month now, I've got to raise my minimum standard, and so it's $300 a day. I've never set a minimum standard each week, but each day. That's the way I've kind of worked things. And so if you're gonna get somewhere, you've got to push yourself. You can't depend on other people to push you. It's got to come from within. And that's something that I guess that's been ingrained in me since childhood, from my athletic experience, my experience in the Boy Scouts, from which I can say I made Eagle Scout. Academically, the same thing. I was a good student. Maybe not as good as my daughter, because she went another step. But I was a good student. I promise you, I was a good student. But then also, as a newspaper reporter, I went from being someone who may have been seen as substandard in my skills to where I was among the best reporters in the country by the time I got out the business. So I've always been one who's always worked at what I've done. Bowling, same thing. I had not won regionals, but I'd won high-level scratch tournaments. In fact, I won those tournaments after coming back from being away from bowling for 18 years. So that's the type of person I am. So I encourage you, if you're at a certain point, reevaluate where you are and see if it's time to push yourself to the next level. And that's where I'm at. Now, for whatever it's worth, I'll go over the numbers that I did last week, which made me realize that, hey, it's time to raise the bar. Last week, Monday, March 13, 2023, I made $314.24. Tuesday, I made $310.95. Then on Wednesday, when I went up to Charlotte, I made $462.25. Thursday, I put in a half a day and made $200.62. And then Friday, I went back up to Charlotte. The reason why I'd gone back up to Charlotte is because I accepted a bungee order. But I got 20 minutes out. I was 20 minutes from starting that order when I got notification that the order had been canceled. And so I kind of had to make something happen. I wasn't going to turn around and go back home because I'd driven an hour and a half to that point. I might as well try to make something. So I ended up finishing at $311.71. Then on Saturday I put in a half a day. I made $148.59. And then yesterday I made $266.65 or $266.85. Now I realized that there was a mathematical pathway of getting there by the time I got home Friday evening, and I realized I was at $1,600. But when I saw all those $300 days, that $400 day, and knowing what I'd been doing in recent weeks, I'm like, yeah, it's time for a change. And by the way, if you like the content that's been provided in this segment of the Gig Geezer or in any other segment of the Gig Geezer, hit that subscribe button, give my content a thumbs up, share my content among others, and I definitely welcome your comments in the section below. Well, that's all I'm going to talk about with that $2,000 week, though. But what I'm realizing is that after talking to Steve, as I mentioned, Steve's been eating in on that pie. Steve's been eating in on the pie. He's tasting the filling of that pie. By the way, I used to make cobblers back before my daughter was born, so we're talking late 1990s. I used to make cobblers for money, and I made them all from scratch. And I know the type of work that goes into cobblers. Cobblers is the first cousin to pies, so this is all familiar stuff for me. For me, I'm just starting to nibble. I'm starting to take a taste of the crust. After what Steve showed me the money that he's making, oh man, the Gig Geezer ain't nowhere close. The Gig Geezer ain't even close. I'm just nibbling on that crust. And some of the things that he suggested to me has made me realize there is money to be made with a cargo van. And it's not all the over-the-road stuff where everybody think the money is. That should be a clue right there. But the money that I've been making on these apps, that's one way. There are other ways. And that's what I'm going to be working on. So, if there's anything to get out of this conversation, nobody is going to push you. I've said this already. Nobody's going to push you. You got to push yourself. If you do have someone in your circle who will push you, that's a friend. That's somebody you want to go to war with. That's somebody you want to go to war with, because they're looking out for you, and they may be willing to block or deflect a bullet for you too. But when it's all said and done, it's still on you, because when you're in business, you got to make it for yourself. Nobody's really gonna hand anything to you. I mean, Larry Holmes once said, I love me. I love me. I love me. He said, if you and I were in a foxhole, we're in a war, and you got shot and got killed, I'm like, better you than me. Because he loves me. Of course, Larry Holmes also said, I might have a 7th grade education, but I got a PhD in life. That was another memorable quote from Champ. So, again, most athletes understand where I'm coming from with this. The coach can prepare you. The coach can help you train your body and your mind. But when it's all said and done, it's still on you to perform. The coach can't do it. The coach ain't out there on the track. The coach ain't out there in the pit, which was my event, the high jump. The coach ain't making the jumps. Or for like me, bowling. I've mentioned about Cleo Hicks. Cleo wasn't bowling the frames for me. Cleo explained some things to me, or at least in concept, about the game. But it was up to me to work on it. And that's what I did. And in business, it's kind of the same thing. You got to become a student of what you're doing. It used to be Sam Andrews, the guy who taught me, who was one of my instructors in school for journalism. The other instructor was Bob Giles. Sam, one of the last conversations we had, he said, when you're out there, man, know what you're doing. Know what you're talking about. So that means you got to be a student of what you're doing. You're never going to know everything. You may become a knowledgeable person in which you may be able to help share information with others, but you'll never know everything. And that's something that I realized. There are questions that people ask me already here on this channel I don't know. But I may, if it's something that I can answer, I'll look it up and then be able, hopefully, to give you an accurate answer. But that's as far as it goes. I'm going to end this segment of the Gig Geezer by sharing yet another of my athletic experiences. I know as a high jumper, I remember the first time I broke a school record. That record had been in existence for, at the time, like about 4 or 5 years. And the guy whose record I broke, he was present. And that was the first time I even attempted that height. That was the first time I had attempted that height. And I cleared it on the 3rd attempt. I didn't even practice for that height. But it's something about once you clear certain heights, what happens is now you gain confidence in what you're doing. And then there's the next big level. And you may not get it that first time, but you may try it again. And I remember another height that I cleared. I attempted it in one meet, didn't do too well. But then I tried it the next meet, first attempt. I'm not talking about where you psych yourself out of trying to accomplish something in business. But what I'm getting at is, all right, you reach a certain level of achievement. Now you have the confidence, you should have the confidence in knowing that you can do it again. And you can make it commonplace to where that's basically your minimum standard. What was once a far-reaching goal is now your minimum standard, or something that's just water under the bridge. And that's what I'm getting at. I mentioned about where $4,000 a month was like a barrier for me, a barrier that I need to break through. Well, hell, I mean, I can't recall the last time. I really can't recall the last time in which I failed to make $6,000 in a month. It's been a while. It wasn't last year, and it may have been 2021 only because I was out of town. But if it was a month in which I was not out of town or something like that, oh no, man, it's been a long time. And that's what I'm getting at. That's really what I'm getting at. Without sounding like somebody on Sunday morning or Wednesday evening or Tuesday evening, the writer spoke of how in the pursuit of this higher calling of life, the writer described how the person disciplined themselves to where lest they speak to others, they consider themselves disqualified. But there was a disciplining of themselves, a training that took place, a pushing of oneself to achieve that higher calling of life or higher purpose or pursuit of life. And that's what I'm getting at. So for me, it's time to move on. And maybe it's for you. And I'm just kind of encouraging you in this segment of the Gig Geezer. Maybe I'm prompting you. I'm triggering that thought within you. And if it is, that's a good thing. And if you like the content that's been provided in this segment of the Gig Geezer or in any other segment of the Gig Geezer, hit that subscribe button. Give my content a thumbs up. Share my content among others, and I definitely welcome your comments in the section below. I'm Inwood Lane. As always, may your grind and may your hustle continue.